Hi, I'm Josh Benner, and welcome to today's Fait Matters. Last week was the 48th anniversary of the landmark Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision. And in those 48 years, more than 60 million babies have been aborted in America. This week is normally when the March for Life would happen. But due to COVID concerns this year, the March for Life has been moved to being a virtual event, which we'll link to in our notes. I'm so happy to have the opportunity today to talk to a good friend of mine, a man who I've known for 10 years, named Seth Drayer, who's the vice president of Created Equal, a pro-life advocacy group in Columbus, Ohio. Seth trains and equips people to defend life. He's debated the pro-life position on college campuses across the country, and has appeared on national television shows on Fox News. So I was so thankful to be able to discuss the current state of the pro-life movement, as well as arguments that we can all use to defend life. I hope you'll enjoy my discussion I had with Seth. Thank you so much. Seth, is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself?
Well, Josh, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm really excited for what you're doing with this podcast, helping people to learn to engage these critical ideas. So I'm just excited to be here today.
Well, I sincerely appreciate your time. And the first place I'd like to start off with your work and your research, and obviously I'm sure you follow the news very closely in the pro-life movement and cause. I know this is a difficult question, but just in your opinion, with what you're seeing right now with the sort of state of the pro-life movement, first thing I'd be curious to ask you about with decisions in the Supreme Court, and do you see abortion in America becoming illegal in our lifetime?
That is a really good question, Josh. And I think that things have certainly changed in the past couple of months. There was a lot of excitement, particularly with the Supreme Court, with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett. We have a better chance than ever before to move away from these unjust decisions of the past, like Roe v. Wade, that many of your listeners are familiar with, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and other abortion law that has been passed down, or rulings really, from the Supreme Court. However, we are facing now a change politically. The winds are changing in America. However, I think that we have to remember that ending abortion is never so simple as one bill going through Congress or overturning Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court. What we need to have is kind of full court press of firing on all cylinders. So if the Supreme Court would do the greatest thing for us and overturn Roe v. Wade, what would happen is that abortion goes back to the states. It wouldn't likely be an immediate abolition of abortion across America. So we can't put all of our eggs in that basket. We can't disregard the Supreme Court, but that's only one piece of it. And so now with a change of the administration probably coming up soon, there's no question that we will have an antagonistic leadership in Washington, D.C. However, what the pro-life movement has done so well, because we've had D.C. against us for so long, is work on individual state houses and governors and trying to pass laws on the state level or even local levels, trying to protect babies. So I don't know that we are, in one way, we're in a greater spot we've ever been with the Supreme Court. Another way, we're in a very difficult spot. But here's what really encourages me, and this is what we try to do at Created Equal. We know that normal people like me, I'm not the president, I'm not a Supreme Court justice. I am not able to make abortion illegal in our lifetime by my own effort. But here's what I can do. Every single day, I can save individual babies' lives by engaging in conversation with good informed dialogue, with good scientific reasoning, good philosophy, to demonstrate that preborn humans are humans, just that, persons like you and me. And that by doing that, I can save individual babies. And also, as we continue having more of those conversations, we move the cultural tide, and that will give us greater hope that we will one day see an end to abortion in America. But I know this. Those who say we are going to see the end is coming soon, maybe they have some crystal ball I don't have, but I know that if the end comes, it's not going to be by default. It will only come through hard work from people like you and like me, daily advocating for truth in the marketplace of ideas.
That's so interesting how you talk about the hard work, because I think sometimes people do think of a certain Supreme Court justice, and there's been 3 in the last 4 years who've been nominated, that's just going to be the silver bullet. And that's going to be the thing that turns the whole tide. And I wish, and I'm sure you do too, I wish it was that simple. But yeah, it's always seemed to me, and I'm not a legal scholar, that would be the trajectory. If the Supreme Court ever did overturn something like Roe, it doesn't just make it illegal everywhere. That it goes back to the states, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on the state level. And sadly, some states are very much in favor of abortion and pro-choice, and so there's a lot of work and effort that needs to be done and will continue to need to be done.
That's exactly right. And, we all talk about the election recently with the head, who was elected president. That's the big question. But there were also interesting factors if you look at other initiatives that were on the docket across the country. And just to see how much sharply divided we are as a nation on abortion, you had two states, Colorado and Louisiana, with very different outcomes on their voting. Both states were voting on items related to abortion. Louisiana was setting up this kind of trigger clause that if Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court, they would have a trigger clause saying our Constitution does not say abortion is legal in Louisiana. It was set up to make abortion illegal in Louisiana to protect from people saying, hey, our Constitution has some hidden right in here for women to have an abortion. They were trying to prepare for making abortion illegal after Roe v. Wade would fall. And then Colorado had an item on their docket where they were voting for, what about banning abortion merely at the 20-week mark, when clearly babies feel pain. We're talking about these are late second trimester babies. In Louisiana, the initiative passed to prepare to make abortion illegal. In Colorado, it failed to ban 20-week abortions. And we're talking not 6-week early babies. This is 20-week babies. The state of Colorado said, no, we want to keep killing them. So we are sharply divided. So again, I am hopeful. I'm not a doomsday pessimist. I think that we have a clear winning case, but clearly in our nation, we are sharply divided. We have a lot of work to do.
Going off script a little bit, why do you have a theory, or why do you think that this has become such a hot button contentious issue over the last 5 years?
I think that, Josh, you read the Cultural Times really well. And so I think that you and your listeners will be familiar with a lot of the movement of the reworking of language and what matters to us as a people. And things like rights and freedoms have been redefined, and everything has been kind of brought into submission to sexual rights, the rights to identify, the rights to do what you want, the rights to express yourself. And so as that has become more and more the supreme right in America, your sexual right, the individual liberties of human beings, like preborn humans that get in the way of our sexual liberty, they're becoming even more and more important to destroy because they are in the way, and they are an unseen people group by and large. And so I think that that's one thing. Culturally, we have run toward the direction of sexual liberty, but also I think that we have had an unprecedented amount of victories politically for the pro-life movement under the duration of President Trump's presidency. And I think that has made the other side very desperate. And so they are going at all costs to achieve their goals. And also, I would say one more point. This, I think, is super interesting. In the 20th century, the left worked so hard, they couldn't pass their social agendas in Congress or in state houses. So they turned to the courts, to the Supreme Court primarily, and other courts to pass, basically legislate from the bench to pass their social agendas, like abortion, and then in the 21st century, same-sex marriage. And now they're seeing a concern that we have so many conservative appointees to the Supreme Court and to lower federal courts. They're concerned that their engine of social change may not be there for them anymore. So again, they are desperate to find any way they can to push their work through.
Yeah, that is something that's interesting, how I've seen a lot of commentary before from the pro-choice side about how the vast majority of Americans are pro-choice. And it's like, then how come, not just in the current Congress, but how come in the last 10, 20 years, we can't pass major pro-choice legislation? It's because it's not as popular as their propaganda wants to make it out to be.
Amen. We're not going away. I mean, they have tried for decades now, thinking they could squash the pro-life movement, and we have been in retreat many times. And today, people talk as if we're in retreat again. I don't know, but I think you're exactly right. Here's the problem. I think a lot of people are by default pro-life. They recognize Inherently, there is something inside the woman when she's pregnant. There's something in there. It's not a cat or a dog. It's probably the same species as the mother. It's a human. But a lot of these people have been shamed into silence by Hollywood, by a lot of the liberal elites in America, by the leading chairs of a lot of university departments. And so they're afraid to make their case. But once we understand that our case is so easy to make, it boils down to three simple sentences. It's wrong to intentionally kill innocent humans. Elective abortion does that. It intentionally kills innocent humans, and that's why it's wrong. That's a simple case anyone can make anywhere in the marketplace of ideas. We just need to be more bold and courageous. Those of us who are kind of quietly pro-life become bold enough to make that statement to people we meet.
I appreciate that. Switching gears a little bit, I'm sure you've heard this argument before, that pro-life people aren't really pro-life, they're pro-birth. And that if you really were pro-life, you would support, and then it's basically a laundry list of government programs that a person has to support to truly be pro-life. And I'd just be curious, what's your response to that?
Well, I think first, one thing I'd like to say is when they say this, I admit the labels only help so much. Pro-life and pro-choice both are a little bit incomplete. When you say pro-choice, well, what choice are you advocating for? I mean, the choice to wear jeans or shorts or sweaters, or what were you talking about here? I'm pro-choice in many things. You have to say what choice you're for. I am the choice to decapitate, dismember, or disembowel a human. Suddenly, when you define the choice, it doesn't sound so great. Pro-life has similar flaws. I mean, yes, we are pro-life, but what life are we talking about? I'm not pro the life of grass. I mean, I don't have a problem with grass, but I also have no problem walking on grass, knowing that I'm hurting the grass. I'm in favor of dogs' lives. I have a dog, but I don't have the same view of dogs' lives that I have of human lives. So we have to define what does pro-life mean too. So I'm talking about, I believe that all human beings are equal. And I believe it is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. That's what I mean by pro-life. Once you understand that definition, you realize that all these other issues like how to deal with welfare and what to do in the face of COVID-19, how wear masks or not wear masks, those things are important dialogues, but they are not relevant to the question of is it right or wrong to intentionally kill a preborn human being. And so I think it's important merely to define the term. Once we do that, it becomes a little more clear. But I do think it's also very interesting. I get this, what you say all the time. So Create Equal, our work, we go to college campuses, we engage in dialogue, we ask people, what do you think about abortion? We see them every day change their minds as we talk to them, but we do get pushback a lot on this. People say, you're just pro-birth. And I think, okay, first of all, let's talk about the terms. I'm talking about abortion. But secondly, I don't think that's true. And I ask them, what's your experience? You know, who are the people you have met who are adopting children, who are out leading homeless ministries, founding orphanages? By and large, you find out these are not people leading Planned Parenthood organizations. They are, by and large, historically, Orthodox evangelical Christians have been ones who have been out there helping people. That is not to say we're the only ones doing it, but it is utterly false to say that those who care about preborn babies don't care all for born children. Now, we may have different political theories on the welfare state, but that doesn't mean that we don't think we should help people who need help. It just comes down to what kind of help actually helps them. And is the welfare state actually helping them? Or could it be that our helping might actually be hurting? That's an important dialogue to have. But again, it's secondary, or not secondary, but a separate issue from whether abortion is right or wrong.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And ultimately, I think that's a straw man argument. Because if you were to say, okay, I'll support all these programs, now are you going to be pro-life? They still wouldn't. So that's, to me, kind of a disingenuous point that gets made.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we close, and I mentioned this, I wanted to just throw out some of the commonly given talking points just in the culture. These aren't meant to be the leading philosophical pro-choice arguments, but the ones that people say on Twitter and on Facebook and on political ads and on billboards and signs. And just to see how you would refute those, in part for people who are listening, to hopefully equip them. Because as you've already mentioned, that this is a winnable debate. And we have a lot on our side. We are the side that is pro-life, pro people living and being born and having the opportunity to live their lives. And that's the right side of this. So I'd just be curious on some of your responses. My body, my choice.
Well, okay, I think that women do have a right to their body, but what you don't have a right to do is harm someone else with your body. So you can say that the fetus inside a woman is part of her body. You're being scientifically inaccurate. It's very clear. Embryology, the study of the beginning of life, makes it clear. When sperm and egg fuse, we have a distinct, living, whole human. We all agree the sperm is part of the dad, the ovum is part of the mother. When they unite, something new comes into being, a distinct human being. I don't think anyone says that the fetus is part of the dad. We know his sperm was involved, but it's not part of him. In the same way, the egg is no longer in existence. A new being exists, a distinct, living, whole human. So yeah, 100%. The mom has a right to her body, but we're not talking about her body. In the same way, a mother should not drown her toddler in her bathtub with her hands, using her body to harm someone else. The mother should not ask someone else to kill this other being inside of her body. Your body, your choice, yes, but not your body, not your choice.
No uterus, no opinion.
Oh, I love this one, because what I like to say is, okay, if that's true, what do we do with Roe v. Wade? This law was decided by 9 men in robes. People always say, well, it's okay, those men can talk because they're pro-choice. And I say, oh, so pro-choice men can have an opinion. It's just pro-life men who can't have an opinion. And they say, oh, yeah, that's fair. Well, that's just nonsense. Secondly, this is really interesting today. As we culturally move away from traditional understandings of men and women, you can no longer say that you have to have a uterus to be a woman. Now, whether or not I agree with that's a separate issue, but today it is no longer viewed that way. So having a uterus does not make you a woman anymore. This issue has changed for them. And so I often ask, well, what does it mean to be a woman? And who really has a right to make these decisions? But it boils down to this. Here's our core argument. Arguments don't have genders, people have genders. Whether you have a uterus or don't have a uterus, the argument you're making is objective outside one. This should be judged on its merit. I was once on a campus and someone said, you don't have a uterus, sit down. And I said, okay, I'll let my colleague talk, Jamie, a woman. They said, oh, you're a Christian, you sit down. They just want any reason they can to ignore your argument. They must respond to an argument, not just attack us as people. That's an ad hominem fallacy.
It's also the only argument where we make that case. Like if you watch a football game and you don't like a call, and it says, well, you never played in the NFL, so you can have it. Or if you read a book, I didn't really like this book. Well, you've never published a book, so you can't have an opinion on books. Again, that's to me a very illogical argument. I've heard the argument that a newly, an ovum that's just been conceived is not a person.
I'm sorry, ovum was what?
I said I've heard the argument that when the baby is recently conceived, it's not a person yet; it's just cells.
Oh yeah, so that's so interesting, and this I think we wouldn't have time in a lightning round necessarily, but I do think it's interesting for listeners to think back to patterns of dehumanization. This is not new. We've often looked at humans in the way or have something we want and said, well, you're not a person. Native Americans, women, Black people, Jews, we have often looked at them and said, you're not a person because you're different in some way. And so I think we have to give it a historical context. But here's my quick response. When people say this, I say, what do you mean not a person? And they'll say, well, the embryo may be human, but she's different from us. I say, well, how is she different? And they give you generally 4 differences between us and embryos. They say they're smaller than us, thus they're not persons. They're not as developed as we are. They, for example, can't dream dreams or have rational thought. They're in a different environment inside the mother, or they're dependent on the mother. These 4 differences are the 4 categories they always give you: size, level of development, environment, or dependency. They say one of these differences makes that human not a person like us. And I say, well, those differences are real differences. But look at you compared to a newborn. How are you different from a newborn? Size, you're larger. Level of development, that newborn can't read books like you can or go to school. Environment, that newborn stays home, whereas you go to work every day. Pre-COVID anyway, we all went to work in an office somewhere. And dependency, you are a lot less dependent on your parents than a newborn is. Is that newborn less of a person? Well, no, of course not, because those differences are irrelevant when it comes to our personhood, our value. And in the same way, the preborn human, those differences are real, but they don't make her any less of a person. All they really mean is she's younger. As she gets older, she'll grow in size, level development, and so on. So this argument is arbitrary and basically at its core prejudice.
Might have a similar response, but I was also going to bring up, sometimes people bring up viability. I feel like this is especially true among people who are not maybe pro late term abortion, but do see abortion being legitimate before, let's say, 20 weeks when with the heartbeat. How would you respond to that? That until the fetus is viable, could live outside the mother, it can be justifiably aborted.
I think the first question to ask is, why does this matter? And I think that there is some intuitiveness to there, I think, to the argument that when you can survive on your own, you matter in a different way. But I think when you ask them, why does that matter? And also ask them, in what way is a newborn really viable? I mean, a newborn certainly can survive outside the womb, but a newborn needs someone to feed her, to protect her, to take care of her in a different way from a teenager who requires less care, but still some care, but less care than a newborn. The younger you are, merely the more care and protection you need. So why does it matter to be able to survive on your own? And what does that really mean? And in what way can a newborn genuinely survive on her own? But if they'll often say, well, all I mean is she can be in an incubator or something, and so the mom isn't really needed in the same way that she is when the baby's inside of her, and that makes it different. I'll just say, well, understand this. The viability reflects our technology. There's nothing changing in the baby to make her viable. Viability, as we understand, is a reflection of how good we are today with our technology to support babies outside the womb. Because of that, in first world countries like America, viability is somewhere between 22 to 24 weeks. In developing countries, it's later in the 30s. So are you saying that babies here in America become persons before babies in third world countries? That seems terribly ethnocentric. And I think that when you put it back to them that way, they realize that we are, again, talking about technology. What we really have to ask is, when is the being herself valuable, not what technological supports are there for her? I mean, we all recognize today that we don't have the technology we need for certain sicknesses. For COVID-19, for example, we haven't perfected our solution for that. That doesn't mean those who are sick with COVID-19 aren't valuable. The technology today may give us certain abilities and capabilities, but it doesn't change the value of the people who need that technology.
I appreciate that. Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I've heard the argument that either a family might not be a particular family might not be the most stable environment for a child to live in, or the child might have some sort of birth defect that's going to affect its quality of life. And in some ways, it would be more humane to just abort the baby.
Yeah. Who are you to decide, right? I mean, they say this, right? Like, it's better for the baby to be killed than to grow up in a world like this. Who are you to decide that? Why have you been given the powers of life and death to control who has a quality of life worthy of life and who doesn't? And are you measuring quality of life compared to your life? That seems terribly, again, prejudice. It's just like someone saying you have to have skin like my color of skin to be valuable. That's prejudice, and that is wrong. It is not humane to decapitate, dismember, and disembowel someone. What we need to do is find real solutions that don't involve killing. Our solutions aren't perfect. Foster care, adoption, we need reform, no doubt. But that does not mean killing is a solution.
It's also another argument that I feel like, based on time, becomes very arbitrary. Because what if you have a 2-year-old and their primary caregiver or caregiver, both parents even, die tragically, and they might have a really tough road ahead of them? As nobody would say, well, Peter Singer might, but no rational person would say, well, this 2-year-old, they're going to have such a difficult life ahead of themselves, we should just advocate for infanticide. But if the baby's not born, that seems to be on the table.
You're right. And that's, at the end of the day, all we're asking for is equality. Treat preborn humans the same way you treat born humans. If you wouldn't kill a born child for this reason, don't kill a preborn child. They're just younger. They're the same human being. You're exactly right.
Last argument that's very popular in the culture: cases of rape, incest, and the health of the mother as justifications for abortion.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's important is I like to ask people, first of all, I'll say, what if for the sake of argument, I would be okay with abortion in rape, incest, and the life of the mother? According to Guttmacher Institute, Alan Guttmacher was the president of Planned Parenthood. This is an organization that does not cook the books for our side. It's a leftist liberal side. According to their research, these abortions account for less than 1% of all abortions. So I'll say, what if for the sake of argument, I was okay with abortion for these 3 reasons? Would you agree with me that the 99% of abortions, those are wrong? And they almost say, well, no, absolutely not. And I say, okay, well then let's talk about the majority of abortions. Once we agree there, then we'll come to these special cases. Because what they're doing is they're using this as an emotional, trump card to try to shut the argument down. They don't really believe this is the only cases abortion should be allowed in. But sometimes they'll say, yeah, all of the abortions are wrong, just these 3 cases. So here's how I respond. When it comes to rape, we must recognize that we are against violence. That's why we're against abortion. And so rape is a great violent act on a woman, and the punishment should be paid to the person who did that. But does it make sense when you have 3 humans involved to punish the victimizer, the father, to help the mother, and then punish the other party, the child? Does that make sense? I would argue that the child is a secondary victim of the assault. The mother is the primary victim, but the child, by definition, is being brought into a world where her father, at best case scenario, is in jail, prosecuted. That's going to be a difficult life growing up with that. She's a secondary victim of what happened. We don't punish victims, we punish victimizers. And furthermore, you certainly don't put the victimizer in jail and punish the baby with capital punishment. That seems horribly unjust. So what we should do is help the mother, help the child. The mom, maybe it would be best for her not to be the custodial mother, to choose adoption of some kind. That's a choice she can pursue. But the violence of rape does not justify the violence of abortion. When it comes to life, that's the rape. That's really important to clarify the point there. On life of the mother, I think it boils down to this. We have a couple of choices. If the mother's life is truly in jeopardy, so not just she's facing bed rest, but she could die from this pregnancy, we could do nothing and stand by and let 2 humans die. That's not good. We could save someone. We should do that. What we can't do is save both of them. That's just impossible right now technologically. So I argue we should do the greatest moral good possible. So we save someone. The question is, who can you save? Before viability, you cannot save the baby because, again, we lack technology to keep that baby alive. But you can save the mother. So just like a nurse in triage has to decide, who do I help? You help the patient who is most likely to respond to the medication you have to offer that patient. When you have 2 patients you're looking at to help, you help the one that is most likely to respond. In the same way, we save the mother because she's the only one we can save. If we could save both, we would do that. We do save the mother because saving one is better than saving neither one.
I absolutely agree. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate your time. And yeah, just God bless you in the ministry that you are doing with fighting for the rights of the preborn. And so, again, sincerely appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Josh. Anyone wants to follow us, please look us up at createdequal.org. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you.